The rain had started before dusk, but by nightfall it had turned into a full-blown storm, the kind that swallowed the plains whole. The old barn at the edge of the ranch stood against it like a wounded beast, groaning under every strike of wind that battered its frame. Lightning flashed through the cracks in the roof, lighting up the dust and hay swirling in the air. Inside it smelled of wet earth, mud, and horses. The lantern hanging from a beam flickered, its flames stretching long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The only sounds were the groan of timbers, the restless whinny of the horses, and the soft, broken sound of breathing. Not from the rancher, but from the woman tied to one of the center posts. Her hair clung to her face, soaked and matted from the rain. Her clothes were torn, her lips pale, trembling from cold. Every few moments she flinched when thunder rolled across the valley, but her eyes, sharp, wild, stayed locked on the man in front of her. He stood there, broad-shouldered and silent, his hat shadowing his face. His boots were caked with mud, his coat heavy with water, and his hands, large, rough from years of ranch work, were clenched at his sides. "Who sent you?" His voice broke the silence, low and jagged. The woman's breath came in uneven bursts. "No one. Don't lie to me." His tone hardened. "You were caught sneaking around the east fence. That's where 2 of my steers were shot last night. So either you're working for whoever's been taking from me, or you're fool enough to wander into trouble." Her voice cracked when she spoke again. "I wasn't stealing. I was running." He took a step closer. "Running from what?" Her eyes dropped to the ground. "From him." The rancher's jaw tightened. "Who?" She hesitated. The wind shrieked through the cracks in the wall, shaking the door on its hinges. She lifted her gaze again, her expression hollow. "Doesn't matter. He'll find me if I stay too long." For a long time the rancher said nothing. He studied her, the bruises on her wrists, the split on her lip, the mud smeared across her dress. She didn't look like a thief. She looked like a ghost of someone who'd already lost everything. Still, the anger in him ran deep. Someone had been crossing his land at night, cutting fences, taking what little he had left. He couldn't afford mercy. Not anymore. He turned away, picking up his gloves from the workbench. "If you're lying, I'll find out. Sheriff's coming at dawn. He'll decide what to do with you." She struggled against the ropes, the coarse fibers digging into her raw skin. "Please, I am begging you! Untie it!" The sound of her plea stopped him cold. He'd heard plenty of liars before, plenty of tears, plenty of excuses. But this didn't sound like a lie. It sounded like a wound. He turned slowly, his eyes meeting hers. "You'll just run," she shook her head, strands of wet hair clinging to her cheeks. "I won't, I swear it." Lightning flashed again, and in that blinding light he saw it. The faint outline of bruises circling her neck, faded but unmistakable. He froze. Those weren't from tonight. They were older, layered pain upon pain. Something inside him twisted. Memories, sharp and unwanted, clawed at him. Another storm years ago, another woman begging him to stop. Not because she was guilty, but because he'd been too proud, too angry to listen. He'd lost her that night. His hand hovered near the knot that held her. His mind screamed for caution, but his heart, the part he'd buried deep, ached to act. "You're bleeding," he muttered. She gave a small, humorless laugh. "You think I haven't gotten used to it?" That hit harder than he expected. He let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding, the tension in his shoulders breaking just slightly. "If you're telling the truth, and I let you go, I'll have the law on my back if you disappear." "I won't disappear," she whispered. I can't breathe like this. Please." Her voice cracked on that last word. Something in it shattered the wall he'd built around himself. Slowly, as if every motion cost him, he knelt down beside her. His fingers brushed against the rope, rough, soaked, fraying from strain. Her breath hitched as he worked the knot loose. The lantern's light trembled, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to hold still. When the last knot came free, her hands fell to her lap. She stared at them as though they didn't belong to her, rubbing her wrists gently, the skin raw and purple. "You're free," he said, voice low. She looked up at him, disbelief flickering in her eyes. "Why would you?" He didn't have an answer. He only knew that something in her eyes reminded him of the part of himself he thought had died long ago, the part that still knew compassion. He stood, his shadow tall and silent, against the barn wall. "There's a fire in the house," he said after a moment. "You can dry off. You'll stay there till morning, then we'll figure things out." She hesitated, uncertain if it was a trick, but the exhaustion in her body overpowered her doubt. When she tried to stand, her knees buckled. Before she hit the ground, he caught her. For a moment, her weight in his arms startled him. She was light. Too light, like someone who hadn't eaten in days. Her head rested against his chest, her breath shallow and uneven. "Easy," he murmured. "You'll be fine." She wanted to believe him, but trust was a foreign thing now. Still, his voice, deep, steady, didn't sound like a man used to cruelty. He carried her across the muddy yard toward the house, the rain soaking them both. Every flash of lightning revealed the scars of his ranch. Broken fences, a half-collapsed barn door, land beaten by time and loss. Inside the cabin, the fire was still burning from earlier. He set her down gently by the hearth, grabbed a blanket from the back of a chair and draped it over her shoulders. Steam rose from her wet hair as the warmth began to reach her. She looked up at him again, eyes shimmering in the firelight. "You could have left me there," she said softly. "I almost did," he admitted, his voice gravelly. "But something in me couldn't." She gave a faint smile, the kind that barely reached her lips. "That something, you should hold on to it." He didn't respond right away. He poured a cup of coffee from the pot on the stove and handed it to her. She took it with trembling hands, holding it close for warmth rather than drinking it. The silence between them stretched, filled only by the crackle of fire and the rain hammering the roof. Finally, he spoke. "You said someone's after you." Her eyes darkened. "He doesn't like when I leave. He says I'm his." The rancher's jaw tightened. "Your husband?" She nodded faintly. "Was, or supposed to be. He took everything from me. When I finally ran, I didn't look back." He crouched down beside her, the flickering firelight catching the scars on his hands. Scars from rope, from work, from life. "You won't have to run tonight," he said quietly. She studied him, searching for deceit, but found none. "Why are you helping me?" He hesitated, then spoke as if each word cost him something. "Because I know what it's like to be trapped. And because—" He looked into the fire, his eyes reflecting the flames. "No one deserves to beg just to be untied." The words hung heavy in the air. She stared at him, and something in her eyes softened. A flicker of gratitude, or maybe sorrow. "You don't even know my name," she whispered. He gave a tired smile. "Don't need to. Not tonight." Outside, the storm began to fade, the thunder moving farther into the hills. Inside, the fire burned steady and warm. The woman leaned back, exhaustion pulling her toward sleep. Her fingers still trembled slightly, but for the first time in a long while, she wasn't afraid. He stayed there, watching her, making sure she was safe. The night stretched on, silent except for the crackle of embers and the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing. When her eyes finally closed, he rose slowly, adjusting the blanket around her shoulders. He stood there a moment longer, staring into the fire, lost in thoughts he'd buried deep. The mistakes, the regrets, the ghosts that still whispered in the dark corners of his heart. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like a monster. He felt like a man again. Flawed, broken, but still capable of mercy. He glanced at her one last time before turning toward the window. The rain had stopped. The wind had softened to a low sigh across the plains. "Rest easy," he murmured under his breath. "You're safe here." And though she couldn't hear him, a faint smile touched her lips in her sleep, as if her body already knew that the nightmare had finally begun to fade. He stood there until the last of the storm died away, the lantern dimming, the world outside turning quiet once more. A fragile peace hanging between two lost souls, bound not by fear or suspicion anymore, but by the smallest act of humanity. A man untying a rope when he didn't have to.